Michaela Guzy is the trailblazing founder of ohthepeopleyoumeet.com, a global content powerhouse born from her solo adventures filming stories in over 100 countries. From policy shifting films in Sierra Leone to spotlighting luxury reopenings like Fairmont's Cape Grace in Cape Town, her journey weaves film, wellness, and authentic hospitality into actionable narratives for Africa's tourism leaders. Today on the FHS Africa podcast, she'll unpack her solo path and insights tailored for hoteliers and operators. Welcome, Michaela.
Thank
You,
you. It's such an honor.
you've gone from corporate Michaela, and you and we chatted previously about your corporate journey, to building the people you meet and filming around the world, mostly solo. So what was the one moment on that journey when you thought the risk was absolutely worth it, leaving the corporate environment, and tell us a little bit more about that journey.
Well, sure. I mean, yeah, I kind of had no idea what I was doing, but I was on gardening leave from departing American Express. And it was the first time in my young adult life that I had a chance to actually stop. I literally wasn't allowed to work. And so it gave me the freedom to start Oh the People You Meet without having to instantly make money. Because I'm sure if I was allowed to have gone and worked, I would have jumped right back into something and not given myself the chance. And so, um, in those first few months of leaving corporate America and my corporate identity behind, I said yes to everything I had put on hold for jobs and guys and the rest of it. And so, I went on a solo one-way ticket to Africa and traveled around 7 countries, over 3.5 months. My parents thought I had absolutely lost my mind. Fun fact, when I write the book one day, I called that my first, like, system eject moment, where I knew I had to blow up life. There's nothing wrong with my life. In fact, on paper, I think my life looked pretty darn good. But I wasn't fulfilled, and I had this, like, itchy feeling on the inside that there was something that I was meant to do. Um, and I had done a lot of journaling and talking to mentors in the travel industry, um, but nothing was scratching the itch, and I kept getting promoted in corporate America, so it wasn't that I was unsuccessful, but, I knew there was something out there that I was meant to solve for that didn't exist yet. And some of the problems that I saw in corporate America were publishing in particular didn't have a digital, social, or video solution I believed in. This is back in 2012 when I left. And in an editorial perspective, no one was talking about why I like to travel, which is meeting new people. And, you know, I, the first honest to goodness moment when I landed in Africa was like a 40-hour flight. I landed in Kenya, and I was in this beautiful kind of safari-like tented house in the middle of the bushes outside of Karen in Nairobi. And I had this like really hot bath, and they're like, "Oh, so and so, this Kenyan fashion designer Anna Tobinski is coming to meet you for drinks." And I just had this moment of being like, "Oh my God, what have I done?" Like I've left corporate America. I don't have a job. I'm in Africa by myself as a woman on a one-way ticket. Like, what have I done? And then I wandered down for the drinks with this designer that I admired her work in magazines, and I just wanted to meet her. And my travel advisor, Muriel Truder, helped me track her down. And she's so inspiring, and she just kind of renewed the hope that I needed that I was on the right track. And, she gave me a quote that actually is the de facto motto of really my whole journey and commitment to Africa, but really to why I start my company and travels in general, and that is travelers originally come to Africa for the wildlife. They fall in love with the landscape, but they return for the people. I mean, you can even see over my corner, that was me filming in 2018 in Botswana. And it's a very special piece to me, and I even in Los Angeles have Africa all over my life. But there were just so many like moments. Like I went on my first safari, and I thought, well, that's so sad. I'm gonna have my first safari by myself. And I was sitting around a communal table with the general manager, and the general manager put a card down in front of me, and I was like, Frank Castro, Adventure International. I was like, "Where did you just get this card?" And she's like, "Oh, he's one of our top advisors. He's sitting over there." And I'm like, "Frank?" And so here's a man that I had met in Mexico, but I spoke at the Adventure Travel Trade Association the year before, and I'd met him at the conference, and he became, my travel buddy. And I was just like, what on earth? So, like, the universe or whatever you believed in sent me a really strong sign that, like, no, you're good. You're exactly where you're meant to be right now. And so I had my first safari with a friend, and then he ended up sponsoring me to climb Kilimanjaro a couple months later. So, like, just you never just say yes.
So that that
I don't
that
know if I
experience,
totally answered your question, but
yeah, you did, and what you're describing is for many international travelers coming to Africa for the first time, and the media and everybody shapes a narrative of Africa,
Uh-huh.
which when you land on the ground as a first time traveler is
Mm.
totally magical. It's such a
Yeah.
phenomenal continent. Um, and
And
so
no, it literally brings you to tears. Like it
yeah,
when I returned to New York after that first journey, I remember it felt like my heart had been ripped out of my chest and served back to me on a silver platter, and I was like, I can't go back to living the way that I did. Like, it just m inherently, like, my whole value system changed, and I didn't ever go back to corporate America. I'm 14 years into actually, next week is our 14-year anniversary, into creating this crazy content house that didn't exist before.
we're actually very glad you did because spreading the message far and wide and creating awareness of the hospitality and tourism in Africa is a vital part of that. At FHS Africa, we operate in the development, the investor meets operator meets owner space. But I think a very important part of that is the role you fulfill and people that shine a light on what's going on in Africa. And I personally believe Africa's tourism industry is set for a massive burgeoning. As you'll know, it's growing at twice the global rate as it is. But I think also dispelling a lot of those preconceived notions is vitally important. We're really glad you've embarked upon this journey. What I wanted to ask you as well, because you've traveled so often and so independently across Africa, how's that shaped? I think you answered some of it in uh, this experience, perhaps almost spiritual experience you went through. But I mean, um, how's that shaped you going forward in terms of looking at hospitality and tourism across the continent?
I think having before I ever set foot in sub-Saharan Africa in 2012, and I do think that's an important distinction. I knew I always wanted to go there. I knew it was going to be a very moving experience. I've always felt very drawn to it. Um, but once you got there and you meet all the people, and I'm talking about the designers like Anna Turbinsky, and then she also employs all these local women, and so, like, everything is, like, handcrafted, handmade, like, everything's locally sourced. But it's still, like, beautiful design, and the craftsmanship is amazing. And then you start to go to some of these lodges, and, I think the popular misconception in the Western world, in the US and Europe, Australia, is that you're gonna go to somewhere like Africa, and it's gonna be so behind, and it's gonna be so poor. And there's a lot of work to be done across Africa. But, in reality, there's such creativity. And, I mean, there's so many people that come to Africa, and they're so inspired by what they see that they want to build medical tech companies. They want to come in and help set up infrastructure. They want to help protect the environment, the wildlife. But there's already, like, when people think Africa's so behind, I'm like, maybe in some regards, but I was like, if we look at sustainability and sustainable travel, I think Africa's been leading the way. If you look at African bush camps, if you look at Singida, if you look at wilderness safaris, they all have environmental design. They all have dedicated people to protecting the wildlife, to making sure that their buildings are at one with nature and as sustainable as possible. They all have community development programs and schools for their employees, children. They have medical programs. I'm even thinking like Michael Dyer was one of the first people I met in Laikipia in northern Kenya, and he owns Barana Lodge. And that man, I get the chills just thinking about it. He's a wonderful human, but he has a beautiful luxury lodge that has spared no expense in curating the experience for international travelers, environmental design, great food, great wine, all those things. But then he also takes kids, local kids, into the safari parks to understand why international travelers come and trying to make them understand the value of wildlife to their future and that there is hope, that they could one day be a safari guide, that they could one day come work in one of these lodges and have a ticket to the dance, have a career, have something different. And then he also creates this amazing camp where the tribes sometimes where what in US anyway we would call kind of like gang violence. The tribes are at war with each other. He brings them together to play soccer, and it becomes this, sport where they're all together and having fun in a competition, and he invites all their families to come camp on the grounds. It's safe, it's patrolled, there's food, there's water, there's games. He puts on shows like plays to help them understand hot topics like safe sex and protecting against HIV and AIDS. And then he has all these doctors and dentists volunteering so that anybody there can get medical treatments. Like I walked in that tent and I saw someone getting their teeth extracted with just straight up pliers, no Novocaine, no nothing. And I was like, okay, talk about perspective. I'm never going to complain again, like when I go to my dentist, because wow, I almost fainted watching that person get their tooth pulled. So, um, yeah, it forever shifted my perspective and made me so unbelievably grateful. It also made me, I already felt like I was pretty conscious and that I worked to choose safari operators or lodges or camps that I thought were going a little bit extra to protect wildlife, people, landscape. But after that kind of initial journey across sub-Saharan Africa, I saw so much good being done, and I was like, "Okay, no, now I'm gonna dedicate our platform to telling stories about people who are going, like, the extra mile and really, that really genuinely care."
So please tell us a little bit more about that. I know you've worked on projects that have helped shape or shift public policy, for instance, in Sierra Leone through film and the work you've been doing it. Please tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, no, that was very exciting. In 2019, we were approached by the World Bank, and the World Bank brought us over to Sierra Leone. The premise was that the legendary Dr. Jane Goodall was coming over, and it was to celebrate a gentleman who owns a chimpanzee sanctuary called Takagama. Had approached Jane decades earlier about these chimpanzees that he was just like personally rescuing, and Jane encouraged him to create a sanctuary. And now he has this thriving sanctuary and it has like a beautiful lodge there. Sierra Leone has survived somehow all the things like the war, most significantly Ebola, mudslides, now pandemic. And so when we went to film, it was right before the pandemic, and we had so much positive momentum going in there. While we were there, Dr. Jane Goodall was given the Order of Raquel, which is the highest order from the president directly. Um, to watch a legend like that get such an honor, I'm sure it was one of many accolades in her toolkit, but she's such a was such a gracious person and such a delight and a light to be around. But the chimpanzee was named the national animal, which therefore granted it protected status. And it gave Balo, this man who's dedicated decades of his life now to protecting wildlife. It gave him a lot of positive awareness. But it also started things like e-visas on arrival, and they were Idris Elba was there as well when we came back to do our film premiere, because he has they're giving him citizenship, and so they were opening up that kind of diaspora passport for people that maybe because of slave trade, etc., had been shipped off to different places. And so it was just really extremely powerful. And I again, I think the perception, especially if someone hasn't been to Africa before, is that things are behind, but actually they have beautiful design and high quality. And we interviewed a fashion designer, we interviewed a local chef. Um, the luxury hotels were starting to come. I don't think I mean, I'm a history buff, so I loved learning about the history of even like the slave trade and how that impacted, future generations going over to places like the US and Europe. And I think it's really important to acknowledge all of those things. But it was really cool to also see what the microfinancing that was coming in from the World Bank, also from the Korean Bank, to help local businesses, like millions of dollars in microfinancing came in because of that project, empowering all kinds of entrepreneurs. And we had, one young guy, he had fled during the war to the UK with his family. He came back and fought Ebola. Helped set up these tech hubs. And then he has this like really cool outdoor adventure company and set up like two little lodges in the coffee plantations. And I see that creative spirit all over Africa, and I don't know, it's just like it's cool, it's funky, it's a little bit edgy. Um, I mean, I encourage, development people. You know, I think sometimes, people think, "Oh, well, you're media, and so we're over here, this is B2B." Um, I also run a funny line because I report for a B2B publication, but also because I've been in the travel industry for almost 30 years. Um I think I help influence thought leaders, and so I also always used to go to the development conferences even when I was in corporate America, because I like to sit at the intersection where the conversations are starting to happen, but I kinda see it as this full loop because media help influence the consumer's opinion, which is ultimately what the developers are trying to build for. So it just if we're not all, like, in flow with each other, it's just not gonna work very well.
Yeah, and so tourism and hospitality is such a vital part of the continent's economic driver. Uh, just in terms of taking a 30,000-foot view of it, what are your thoughts in terms of what Africa's doing right at the moment? What is that common narrative that is resonating?
I mean, again, I think just first off, being more sustainable is, I think it's hands down. If you are, and not everybody has to do every project either. Like you can get really overwhelmed by the amount of sustainability work that needs to be done across the world and or even just in your own backyard. But if you can really be, I'm trying to think of like the Brando. If you think of that hotel, they're like a role model of all things sustainability. They have a ton of money. Um, but their environmental design, the way that they're embedded, in the community, the amount of employment that happens from the local communities, and also that they set up things like schools. But then what they do for the traveler is not only provide a sustainable experience, and I do think it's on the traveler to also be responsible. You're responsible for doing your research and choosing the place, or at least using an advisor that will help guide you. But what they do for the consumers as well, and I love this, is getting advocates at an early age. They set up a learning experience where like the kids can come and work with the scientists that live on site and participate in the research projects. They can go plant coral. And I think when you can teach young travelers from an early age, but like I'm not young anymore. I'm the first person in line to like go sit with the scientist and like go learn the thing. And like in Panama, I went out and I was in a permaculture farm and I was out there getting dirty and learning all about it. And it's such a fun experience because I'm working with local people, but I'm also learning something new. And that was, I mean, actually right before the pandemic, I predicted all these trends. I spoke at the Accor Luxury uh, general managers meeting in Istanbul. I mean, for all I know, I brought the pandemic back to the United States because it was like right before. um, but that said, I predicted, 5 trends that I saw coming out into the world, and one of them was learning something new. Um, you know, going to, this place in Brazil, and we were on horseback and having this experience, but we went to a coffee plantation, and I did the same thing in Rwanda, by the way. I went They have amazing coffee all across Africa, especially Rwanda, and I went to this really cool coffee house in Kigali, and I was like, "Where does this coffee come from?" And he's like, "You want me to show you?" And I was like, "Yes." And before I knew it, like, we're out in the countryside and we're, like, picking beans, and, like, the guys were so excited to show us, and I happen to know that the Gates Foundation do quite a bit with coffee in Rwanda as well. And so I think when hotels and lodges can set up those learning experiences, or, like, if you're a hotel in Cape Town, for example, the first call I would make when you're starting to set up your programming, experiences that you can have. It's called James Fairney from Utandu. You guys actually, called him from FHS in Cape Town and had his choirs from the townships come, and you made a donation, and that donation is going back to help multiple townships within, South Africa, and he has over 300 projects, and so many travel companies will come in and they'll commit to their travelers building that school. But this way you're not going in and staring at people, who are just living their lives and trying to earn their living. They're living their lives. Like, go in a project where you know that your dollar is now supporting local jobs, like your guide, your driver. I'll give you a great example. There's a township art tour, and they're called Mabanang. You can go in, you're supporting the guide, you're supporting uh, the people that own the house. Artists create their art, they're hung in these houses, and now you go on an art tour, you go in people's homes in the township, you meet the artist, you meet the homeowner, you can have conversations with them, but you can also buy the art. And, like, your dollar has just helped so many people in those communities, and to me, and then having the stamp of approval of Utandu or Mabunang or something, now you've really done something quite special. And to me, it's about, yes, people want to have, the nice sheets and, the beautiful, locally made products in the bathroom, but you also need to have, like, the experience, the thing that gives people the sense of place of why they traveled there in the first place.
So, I mean, we're seeing a large move towards experiential travel. There's so many topics we haven't really touched upon: wellness and tourism travel. But maybe it's an apt opportunity for us. You unpacked five trends that would be impacting another continent. Do you have five key trends that potentially you think would shape the future of hospitality and tourism in Africa?
Well, I think well-being is definitely something that should be focused on, and well-being is more than just being able to do yoga on safari, and, like, I've done that, and I really appreciate it when I have, like, a mat in my room and I can wake up and watch elephants at a watering hole. Um, but I think longevity is really what, people are really focusing on now. So it's beyond the massage, it's beyond the yoga, um and, you can't have longevity centers necessarily in all these safari camps. Um, but I have to say, I'll go to Cape Town and I'll do certain, like, more cosmetic or longevity treatments because they're significantly less expensive for me to do. Plus, then I get to be in Cape Town for a while.
Yeah, well,
Lisbon,
exactly right.
Portugal is another place that's very affordable. So,
It,
um,
yeah,
yeah, and so, I
speaks.
mean, I have a number of doctors or even, like, hotels that have a spa beyond just the spa and beyond just the cosmetic, thing that are really truly helping you figure out, like, in Switzerland, I did the Chanel Palace, and, I mean, they're cutting edge technology, it's extremely expensive, the 1% go there, but e 8 8 days is what I did. I ate like 1,000 calories a day. It was raw, it was vegan, there was no alcohol, there was no caffeine. They're measuring your oxygen intake, your blood intake, your cholesterol, like your fat count. I was doing anti-gravity running machines, and, it was really funny when I sat with the doctor for my intake because I was measured by a doctor every single day. I was like, "Oh, no, I'm an insomniac. I can't sleep. I can't sleep." And so that was the main thing I really wanted to focus on. I w I was narcoleptic, I couldn't stay awake. I was just, like, falling asleep in all their, like, the mud bath, whatever, with the, infused, I don't even remember what was being poured in my bathtub, and she's like, "It's interesting, you fall asleep every single day," and I'm like, "I know, I feel so relaxed." I think inflammation is something, and cortisol, that you probably hear a lot about on if in podcast, and being a woman of a certain age, you hear about it all in all of the ads that are being sent to me. But it's a real thing. I think the hyperconnectivity. So to me, the biggest trend after I left international luxury travel market in December, which is kind of my last conference of the year, and it is connection. And by connection, I mean connection to oneself, wellness, getting in touch with yourself, deep relaxation. I do think people are really stressed in a way that we've never experienced as human beings before. But connection to your loved ones, friends, family, your partner, but then connection to nature, and connection to local people. And so, and it's funny because connection is what got us in trouble in the first place, the phone and everything. So I'm like, it's this funny thing of connection, but that's kind of my catch-all word for 2026, is that we need to connect and then disconnect from our devices so that we can properly connect with ourselves.
So speaking of connections, we're gonna see you in Kenya. We're gonna connect again, and when
Yeah.
we bring
I mean, Kenya's
FHS
where
up.
my African journey started, so, or my sub-Saharan African journey started, so it does carry a special weight for me, a special gravitas for sure.
Well, we look forward to seeing you in Kenya again, and continuing this discussion. Thank you very much for a unique
It
insight, Michaela. We really appreciate it.
The pleasure is all mine, and, it's an honor to both have spoken in Dubai, but, to be a part of the Africa Advisory Committee. I think in a former life, I must have been born on that continent because I truly feel like I come alive when I'm there, so
Well, we look forward to welcoming you to your spiritual home.
thank you. I appreciate it. Santi sana.